There's a certain art to solving problems. Some people take the straight path, logical, clean, efficient. But then there are those who prefer the long way around. There's something about Rube Goldberg machines that's fascinating. These overly complicated contraptions rely on a chain of events being set off to complete an oftentimes simple task in unnecessarily convoluted ways, and they're everywhere. Growing up, did you ever play Mousetrap?
Just turn the crank and snap the plank and boot the marble right down the chute. Now watch it roll and hit the pole and knock the ball in the rubber duck.
Or what about watching iCarly? There's something very whimsical about Rube Goldberg machines. With the amount of thought and precision required to make one of these machines, and with the comparative ease of the tasks they perform, your gut reaction would be that they're a complete waste of time. And yet, there's something entrancing about them when everything works perfectly. When, through all the chaos, you see a machine perform its intended purpose flawlessly. In many ways, speedrunning is exactly the same. Completing a game is rarely hard, and the comparative benefits of speedrunning are often small. Despite this, the work required to make a speedrun work can be mesmerizing. It requires each piece to be perfectly placed, with the game breaking in all the right ways. Every time you watch a speedrun, you're witnessing hours of practice and precision, all for what appears to be a simple goal. Behind each runner, there's a community dedicated to pushing the game to its limit. Even the smallest detail can have a cascading effect on every other part of the run, leading to every inch being combed and every question asked to save even a few frames. The result of this is some of the most impressive feats performed on a controller. This is the genius of speedrunning. Kingdom Hearts is one of the most well-known series in all of gaming, with Kingdom Hearts 2 often being seen as the crown jewel of the franchise. The game follows Sora, Donald Duck, and Goofy Goof as the trio travels between different worlds fighting the evils of the universe. As a speedrun, the community has to account for a mixture of combat and movement segments, with a progressive ability selection that changes how players move through levels. An essential element that factors heavily into runs are the boss fights. Each boss is designed around a unique mechanic or weakness, encouraging players to learn and exploit patterns rather than simply overpowering them. This is amplified for speedrunners, as optimally defeating a boss early can often avoid slower desperation moves that can be triggered when the boss has low health. Kingdom Hearts 2 builds off of much of the groundwork laid by the first game, with two key additions being limits and drive forms. Limits are powerful attacks, often involving other party members, which drain Sora's MP in exchange for potentially massive damage. Drive forms, on the other hand, enhance Sora's abilities. Activating a drive form enters Sora into a strong, temporary alternate playstyle depending on which form is selected. Final form is the most powerful of the drives, allowing for both physical and magic attacks to be performed with additional strength. Limit form is exclusive to the final mix version of the game, and features Sora reverting to a playstyle more similar to Kingdom Hearts 1. Having been developed by Square Enix, makers of RPG giants like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, it makes sense that a few RPG elements snuck their way into Kingdom Hearts 2. When enemies are defeated, the party receives XP, leading to level ups. When Sora levels up, he receives a stat boost to his strength, magic, or defense each level, additional ability points for every few levels, and even certain abilities. This allows Sora's survivability to scale throughout the game without needing to grind for item boosts. The final mix version of Kingdom Hearts 2 introduced a unique ability though, which had a massive impact on speedruns. No Experience is an ability which the player has from the very beginning of the game. When enabled, the party will receive no XP when enemies are defeated, leaving them stuck at level 1 even while the rest of the game continues to scale up. This also locks Sora out from all the abilities he would receive while leveling up. This includes vitally important abilities like Second Chance, which leaves the player at 1 HP after being hit regardless of how much damage Sora should have taken, so long as he had more than 1 HP before getting hit, and Once More, which leaves Sora with 1 HP after being comboed so long as he had more health before the combo started. Both of these abilities are essential for surviving the strongest and most complex boss fights. Combined with Sora's diminished level 1 stats, even otherwise trivial encounters can pose a threat. Despite not being able to level up, certain abilities can still be unlocked by progressing through the game, either by defeating a boss or by reaching key checkpoints. Notably, this includes all types of magic. Over the course of the game, Sora learns 6 spells, each of which has 3 tiers that increase their effectiveness. 3 of these spells deal direct damage to enemies. Fire creates a ring around Sora, Blizzard functions as a projectile, and Thunder locks on and directly attacks a target. Cure, on the other hand, heals Sora and nearby party members. The last 2 spells, Reflect and Magnet, are a little different. Reflect allows players to block attacks and also deal damage by flaring out when the spell is finished. Finally, Magnet pulls nearby enemies together, dealing damage to them while in the orb. As a result, level 1 speedruns of Kingdom Hearts 2 require an incredible degree of precision and planning, with some fights being choreographed down to each action, as even a single hit could mean dying. players are forced to get creative due to their diminished moveset. A key example of this is the gang's first return to Twilight Town after completing the Halloween Town / Agrabah Junction. At this point, there's a notable difficulty spike in the game. Beyond the recommended level being 28, and Sora still being only level 1, Twilight Town is the first real exposure the player has to nobodies, which are Kingdom Hearts 2's more difficult enemy variant. Notably, Sora needs to fight 3 of the hardest non-boss enemies at once, the Berserkers. Speedrunners are able to make this otherwise difficult encounter trivial though. Sora starts by baiting all 3 Berserkers to attack the same spot, then casting Magnet to attract all 3 together. Runners then activate Trinity Limit. When using Trinity Limit, the player has the option of 3 commands and a finisher. Normally, the 3 commands don't deal damage on their own, but instead contribute to the amount of damage the finisher deals. However, enemies still react to them. By using the Ultima command, the team uses a firework attack which oscillates the Berserkers. This causes them to bounce in and out of the magnet. By constantly re-entering the magnet, the Berserkers are continuously procced for damage, causing their health to be eviscerated in an instant. Speedrunners use this to even greater effect in the second phase of the final boss. Here, there's a barrier which needs to be destroyed, but can only be damaged once all enemies have been defeated. By once again activating Magnet and Trinity Limit, these enemies can be quickly overcome. But since all the enemies are eliminated before the limit is done, the damage of the finisher instead is output on the barrier. This demonstrates the creativity required to overcome the disadvantage level 1 speedrunners face, but it's only the start. Kingdom Hearts speedruns revolve around boss fights. Most bosses in the game have various phases to their fights, with the near universal truth being that runners want to avoid bosses activating the desperation move. Once a boss's health is low enough, their AI will have the option to activate their desperation moves, oftentimes becoming invincible while also doing massive damage, with many also being very time consuming. However, a boss cannot activate their desperation move while being comboed by the player. Of course, the developers wouldn't want the player to keep the boss perpetually comboed, so they implement a system which forces a boss out of being comboed. One such way that developers implemented this is known as revenge values, or RVs. RVs dictate when an enemy will break out of a combo and attack Sora, with this threshold varying between enemies. Each action Sora performs has a value assigned to it which can increment the enemy's revenge value counter. When a boss attacks, this value is reset to 0. As such, most boss fights revolve around choreographing attacks which maximizes damage output while minimizing RV accumulation, especially once the boss health is low enough to trigger their desperation move. The quintessential example for manipulating a boss's revenge value for optimal retaliations is the Roxas fight. Roxas has an RV max of 12.5, after which he'll break out and attack Sora. The fight begins with Sora using Reflect to block Roxas's initial attack, then waiting for the combo to reset. After this, he performs a flash step, followed by a basic attack, before using guard break into finishing leap. After this is another flash step, and finishing with Thundaga. Flash Step and basic attacks each have an RV of 1, Reflect, Guard Break, and Finishing Leap's RVs are 3 each, while Thundaga is equal to 4, resulting in a total RV of 16 and causing a forced revenge by Roxas. Crucially, Thundaga causes Roxas to be knocked into the air. This is important as Roxas has 2 types of retaliations. If his RV max is hit while he's in midair, Roxas will perform his downward spiral attack, which lasts for hardly a second. Conversely, if Roxas's RV max is hit when he's on the ground, he'll enter into a much longer combo of his own, making activating the forced revenge at the right time crucial. A similar chain of attacks is performed until Roxas has a bit over 2.5 bars left, at which point Trinity Limit is activated, which doesn't increment RV. Since Donald and Goofy are not fighting Roxas, only Sora's portion of the limit can be performed, leading to the limit taking off just under a bar of health. At this point, Sora enters Limit Form. Limit Form gives Sora access to several more limits, which crucially do not increment RV unless the finisher is activated. By not using any finishers, runners are able to keep Roxas stun locked until the fight is finished. Notably, this strategy allows runners to defeat Roxas without triggering his desperation move. In general, runners design their strategies around getting the boss as low as possible without triggering desperation before expending all remaining resources to finish the fight. One of the most frequent approaches runners use is first entering Final Form and then using Fire Magic. When Sora uses Fire Magic, the revenge value will not increment if the enemy takes damage from any other source. When Sora is in Final Form, his 2 Keyblades are spinning around him and can hit enemies even if the player is not actively using them to attack. Due to this, the revenge value almost never increases when using fire while in Final Form. Once this is done, Sora will revert back to his normal form and activate the Limit Duck Flare. Duck Flare has the benefits of being long lasting, allowing Sora to freely attack as Donald keeps the enemy stun locked while also dealing a lot of damage. Although neither activating Duck Flare nor using its basic attack Rocket Flare increments the revenge value, the finisher Mega Duck Flare can. However, due to how quickly the finisher attacks, no enemy has time to break out of its stun lock, making it a safe way to end a fight. The culmination of all this is fighting Marluxia. In this fight, the player needs to deal with Sora having 2 health bars. In addition to the standard one, a number appears above Sora's head which corresponds to his level. Every time Sora is hit, this number decreases. Upon hitting 0, the fight ends regardless of if the normal HP bar still has health. Since this is a level 1 run though, the counter is also only 1, meaning that taking a single hit at any point in the fight is an instant loss. Given this, the crux of the fight becomes spending as little time as possible where there's even a chance of being hit. This means that basic attacks are riskier since Sora is vulnerable. In contrast, using Reflect, Limits, or keeping Marluxia stun locked in a combo that doesn't increase RV is optimal since each of these are periods where Sora cannot take damage. Fights begin by using Donald's Comet Limit and immediately using 2 ethers to restore MP. Like Duck Flare, Comet deals damage while putting Sora into an invulnerable state and still allowing him to attack freely. Marluxia starts by teleporting, after which there's a small window where attacking will stagger him. Since Comet is active, Sora can safely reflect Marluxia's attack without fear of being hit. As it's set to expire, runners activate Comet's finisher. While Comet Rain has the potential to deal large amounts of damage, it normally doesn't due to knocking enemies into the air. This isn't a problem here though, as Marluxia's whirlwind attack cannot be interrupted, leaving him to brunt Comet Rain's full force. If runners have successfully performed a strategy up to this point, Marluxia will follow this up with a basic combo which can be reflected. At this point, runners enter final form and use fire to not increment his revenge value. This is done to push Marluxia into his second phase. Once his health is low enough, Marluxia starts using an attack where he teleports into the center of the arena and summons 3 pools on the ground. The hitbox of these pools deals constant damage, making it more dangerous to traverse the fight. Runners now activate Duck Flare to make Sora invulnerable and use an ether. With the limit's protection, runners can continually cast Reflect due to the hitbox of the damage pools. Duck Flare's finisher keeps Marluxia stun locked for these reflects, while also dealing massive damage. Once the limit is nearly finished, Sora moves to a safe bit of ground, reflects Marluxia, and activates Comet as more pools are summoned. Timing is especially critical at this point. Marluxia enters phase 3 at around 7.7 bars of health, at which point he'll be able to trigger his desperation move. Comet Rain is activated just before this threshold. Meanwhile, Sora continues to spam Reflect to deal as much damage as possible. At this point, Marluxia is well past the threshold, allowing him to use his desperation move. Luckily, there's a unique quirk where, after using his Tornado Slash attack, he has to use Bloom Shark, during which time runners can enter final form and use fire to stun lock him. While this isn't quite enough damage to finish Marluxia off, one last Duck Flare does the job. More than anything else, Marluxia demonstrates the brilliance behind Kingdom Hearts speedrunning. Bosses evolve from fights into a tightly choreographed dance routine. Every action flows into the next. A Reflect parries a deadly attack, a stagger creates an opening, a limit stalls for a second more of safety. There's a rhythm to it all, a silent beat runners move to which requires balancing aggression with control and execution with improvisation. Every piece of the run is part of a precisely engineered chain reaction, resulting in utter mastery when successful. But sometimes, speedrunning takes different forms. One weekend every year, the best players in the NBA all travel to one city for the NBA All-Star Game. In addition to the game, this weekend is packed with high-flying dunks, rookie showcases, a sharpshooting contest, and there's the Skills Challenge. The Skills Challenge is ostensibly designed to test a player's fundamentals. The issue is that the NBA has just never really got it right. Each year, the challenge varies a little bit, with the obstacles changing slightly. So little care is put into this event that in the run-up to 2025's challenge, the structure of the event was completely misreported. Rather than being 3 rounds made up of a relay, passing, and shooting, as was done in 2024, the Skills Challenge in 2025 combined all these into a 2-round single elimination format. The challenge was made up of 4 teams. Draymond Green and Moses Moody represented the Golden State Warriors, Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell represented the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Zachary Risache and Alex Sarr represented the rookie class. The focus of this speedrun though is the last team, which was made up of Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama, and they represented the Spurs. Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards to ever play basketball. In his age 39 season, Chris is second all-time in both assists and in steals. Nicknamed the Point God, Paul is widely considered to be one of the smartest players the league has ever seen. Next to him is his partner Victor Wembanyama, who is something of an alien. With a listed height of 7 feet 3.5 inches and an estimated 8-foot wingspan, even other NBA players look small next to Wembanyama. Rather than playing a normal big man game, posting up with his back to the basket, Wembanyama is often doing a Steph Curry impression, with nearly half of his shots being 3-pointers. With the versatility and experience of Paul and Wembanyama, the duo entered as favorites to win the event. The skills challenge is made up of one player needing to make 3 bounce passes through a net. They then move on to needing to make a chest pass through another net before approaching the 3-point line. Here, players have 3 attempts to make a 3-pointer. If the player does not make a 3-pointer within the attempt limit, they move on to the next shooting station at the free throw line. Once again, players have 3 attempts and can move on either after a make or 3 misses. The last shooting station is a 3-pointer from the left corner, with a motorized windmill acting as a defender. Once these are done, all that's left is one more pass and needing to make a basket. After this, the players switch off, with the partner needing to complete the same objectives and time ending on the final made basket. The entire challenge is based around how quickly the duos can finish. Each of the 4 teams go one at a time, with the top 2 teams moving on to a second round and the bottom 2 being eliminated. The only thing that matters is going fast. Up first is Wembanyama. Each of his 3 bounce passes are on target, and his chest pass is straight into the net. Now, it's time for the shooting. The first shot is from the right wing. Of all the places where Wembanyama shoots, this one is his worst. From both the top of the key and the left wing, Wembanyama is a 37% 3-point shooter. In the 2024-25 season, Wembanyama will take 102 shots from the right wing. He'll only make 33 of them, roughly 32.4% and over 5 percentage points worse than if he was just a few feet to the left. Victor steps up to the line, picks up the ball and shoots it with 8.5 seconds on the clock, miss. The second one is even further off. Before the third ball even leaves his hand, Wembanyama is turning to start running to the next shooting station. He took all 3 shots in less than 2 seconds. His shots at the free throw line are even further off. Between touching the first ball at 11.6 seconds and releasing the third at 12.8, Victor is flying through this part of the skills challenge having displayed the bare minimum skill required. It's at this point the announcers realize his strategy.
Oh, he's not even worried about this shot. They're just going for time. Look at this.
True to form, the final 3 shots are nowhere close as well. Wembanyama quickly finishes out the challenge with the last pass and finally making a shot at just over 22 seconds. Catching his own make, Wembanyama passes the ball to Paul while the announcers are still speculating about the strategy.
They're not even worried about this. Has Chris Paul's fingerprints all over it. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Paul's attempt is remarkably similar to Wembanyama's. He goes 3 for 3 on bounce passes, makes the chest pass, and gets to the first shooting station at just over 31 seconds. While Wembanyama at least hit the backboard a few times, Paul's are nowhere close. Finishing up with the time of 47.9 seconds, Wembanyama and Paul were by and away the fastest duo. Immediately there was controversy. Boos pour in from the crowd.
Look at the time. It's all about the bounce. Oh, there's some boos.
The camera cuts over to Moses Moody staring up with a look on his face somewhere between confusion, shock, and admiration. It then transitions to Donovan Mitchell giving it 2 thumbs down. The announcers soon go from praising their creativity to reporting that Wembanyama and Paul were disqualified for not taking valid shot attempts. Looking at the previous year's official rules, players must take a max 3 valid attempts, move on after a make, or 3 attempts. The wording of this is interesting, as while it stipulates that a maximum of 3 valid shot attempts may be tried, the condition for moving on mandates continuation at 3 attempts, with no mention of validity. In statutory interpretation, one of the ways of interpreting a rule is the presumption of consistent usage. This means that a word or phrase is presumed to have the same meaning throughout a text, and that if a materially different term or phrase is used, there's variation in meaning. By not mentioning validity for both uses of attempts, it suggests the 2 phrases have different meanings. Given this, a valid interpretation of the rules would be that players can take a maximum of 3 valid attempts, but need only take 3 shots regardless of validity to move on. Wembanyama and Paul claimed that prior to the event, they had asked several officials about whether this strategy would be permitted and were told that it would. Later on, Wembanyama was talking to media and revealed that it was actually his idea to miss shots. He also stated that, if the challenge lets us do this, then there's a loophole. It means we have a problem. As far as speedrunning goes, Wembanyama and Paul demonstrated what it looks like when runners push a game right up to its very limits. Had the NBA allowed the duo to remain in the skills challenge, the integrity of an event few people like would have gone through the floor. Their method, while controversial, was a masterclass in identifying and exploiting design flaws. Speedrunners constantly seek out the most efficient strategies, often leading to playstyles nobody, not even the creators, initially envisioned. Wembanyama and Paul's approach wasn't cheating by the letter of the current rule, but rather establishing a new, dominant strategy that, if allowed, would redefine how every future competitor would have to approach the event. It's a testament to how speedrunners view every constraint as an opportunity for innovative shortcuts. In a similar vein, Superliminal is a game that threads the line between reality and perception. Its core gameplay mechanic is perspective manipulation. While an object may be smaller when you pick it up, by moving it closer to your face, it appears bigger since it's taken up a larger amount of your field of vision. In the case of most games, this only changes the object's perceived size. In the case of Superliminal though, moving the object alters the actual size. In essence, the game world shapes its objective reality around the player's perceived reality, necessitating the player literally take a step back and look at things differently. The devs also designed the game with the intention of it being speedrun. Pillow Castle Games added not only one speedrun achievement, but two. The achievement Speedrunner is awarded for beating the game in under 1 hour, while Superliminal requires runners to beat the game in under 30 minutes. The results of this is a game that is perfectly optimized for speedrunning, allowing runners to fully demonstrate the extent of their creativity and skill. This range of gameplay is best seen when contrasting the Any% and Glitchless categories. While both categories have the same objective of finishing the game as quickly as possible, Any% can be beaten in under 6 minutes, while the world record for Glitchless clocks in at over 21. The difference in how runners approach these categories is evident from the very first level. When it comes to Glitchless, nothing is more important than precise movement, tight lines, and efficient object manipulation. Over the course of the entirety of Induction, runners stop moving for about 1 second. The level starts by walking straight down a hallway and through a room before coming out to a rock blocking their path. This is quickly dealt with by grabbing it, facing upwards, and dropping it, all while continuing to move forward. Entering the next room, runners grab the top ABC block and drag it to the floor, revealing the door to the next room. They then resize the block while moving to use it as a step up to the door. After this, there's a pressure plate that needs to be held down to progress. Walking over the plate, runners grab a block on the table within frames of the door opening, turn around and drop the block to hold the pressure plate down, walking through the door, and re-grabbing the block before the door shuts in a single fluid motion. This block is then used to jump up and into the door. Moving through the next few rooms, the runners need to stop for just a few frames to grab a chess piece from a cubby in the wall, turn 180 degrees, and place the piece on a trigger inside another cubby. This is followed by the longest moment without moving, where the player stops in the doorframe, grabs a wedge of cheese, and looks up to resize the piece. Stopping in the doorway resizes the cheese more quickly due to it being a significantly lower ceiling. The cheese is then used as a ramp to the next door. Before entering the next room, the alphabet block inside it is grabbed. This causes it to move from inside of the room to on the other side of the doorway, dramatically reducing its size. This gets it out of the way of the wooden bar that the player uses on a pressure plate to open the next door. The following puzzle sees the runner grabbing a block, using the wall to quickly resize it down, then placing it on a pressure plate behind a broken mirror. This is followed by a room where the pressure plate is behind a door that prevents objects from being brought through. This is solved by throwing a block over the wall and settling it while it falls on the other side. After this is a room with two plates that need to both be pressed for the door to open. Runners pick a sign from across the room and resize it while walking until it's large enough to press both buttons. The rest of the level is finished by cleanly navigating the remaining hallways, finishing the level in under 1:45 seconds. A few months after the game was released, IGN had Superliminal's development team react to the glitchless world record. From the beginning, the devs paid attention to speedrunning. This went beyond simple awareness. When implementing the speedrunning achievements, Pillow Castle Games mimicked how speedrunners time games.
We also based our in-game achievements of the speedrunning. We actually took a look at the speedrunner conventions and did the same thing.
Midway through the level Clone, one of the developers voices his preferences for glitchless speedruns.
Yeah, I think glitchy speedruns are fun, but there's kind of more of a craft to the glitchless runs.
Do you agree? Let's take a look at Any%'s approach to induction and see how it compares to glitchless. The run is the same up until the first block is lowered. Runners then pick up the rook in the corner of the room and enlarge it until its aura changes the bottom of the screen's color. At this point, runners lower the rook, rotate it so that it clips into the character model, and then moves into the doorway. The runner jumps, the rook is released, and the player performs a warp. Warps are one of Superliminal's seminal glitches. By making an object incredibly large and standing in a position where there's no space above the runner, jumping and dropping the object while the player's model is clipped inside of it causes the game to push the player out and into a completely different location. Where the warp ends up is entirely dependent on the position, size, and rotation of the held object. Any change to these requisites will result in warping to a different position. While Glitchless beats Induction in a bit over 100 seconds, Any% can finish it in under 23. Other levels are even more shocking. In Glitchless, Labyrinth takes nearly 4 minutes to beat, Any% finishes it with only 2 presses of the spacebar. Many levels in Superliminal finish on an elevator trigger. In Labyrinth, when the player reaches the end of the first hallway, the elevator door opens to reveal a brick wall before warping the player back to the bedroom after a few seconds. The elevator asset is reused from previous levels though, meaning that its interior is still linked to an end level trigger. By jumping on top of the adjacent fire extinguisher and continuing to hold forward, the player will inch into the wall, eventually allowing them to ledge grab into the elevator and hit the trigger. Where the brilliance of Superliminal speedrunning truly shows through is the all collectibles category. There have been countless comment wars waged over what a real speedrun is, with many people arguing that skipping large portions of the game invalidates the run as it no longer adequately reflects mastery over developers' intended gameplay mechanics, while others believe that anything in the game is fair to use so long as the run gets faster. All collectibles is the perfect marriage of these two ideas, allowing runners to still perform glitches, but still needing to play through the game to obtain every object. Looking to Induction again, all collectibles begins the same as Glitchless and Any% until it reaches the hallway blocked by the Rook. Rather than just moving it out of the way, all collectibles brings it into the next room and uses it to set up a Rook launch. The mechanics of launches are very similar to warps. Since there is room above the object though, the player is pushed upwards, and because there's no cap on upwards momentum, it can launch them high into the air and be able to navigate the map from out of bounds. The Rook launch is used to land on the edge of the room with the wooden bars, where a collectible chess piece is located. While falling, the alphabet block is moved out of the way, allowing the player to quickly grab the wooden bar and move to the next room. The next few rooms mirror what's done in Glitchless until the final hallway is reached. Here, the player must first empty a fire extinguisher and then pull a fire alarm before jumping over the end of level pit. Down this hallway is a blueprint that must be collected, after which the runner can return to the pit and finish the level. In this respect, Superliminal has managed to thread the needle and provide runners with a host of categories catered to every way of approaching the game. Having been designed with speedrunning in mind, Glitchless thrives on its satisfying movement and precise inputs, resulting in a speedrun built around optimal gameplay. Any% takes advantage of the game's unique physics and perspective manipulation to perform exploits that push the game to its limits. All Collectibles takes an approach somewhere in the middle, with runners being allowed to do anything, but the game places limits on how far it can be pushed. For a game built around shifting reality, the ingenuity and adaptability of Superliminal's game style has allowed it to become one of the most popular speed games. Equally as popular is BFBB. Few games have as complicated a routing process as SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. The game is made up of 9 levels, 3 boss levels, and a hub world that connects everything together. The hub world is further divided into 3 sections, with the latter 2 parts being locked before the first 2 boss fights. There are 3 main types of collectibles. Golden spatulas are used to unlock levels to progress through the game, with the final boss being locked behind a 75 spatula door. The game has 100 total spatulas, with each level having 8 spatulas, 4 spatulas for the 3 boss fights, and the remaining 16 being given in exchange for the other 2 types of collectibles. The next class of collectibles is Patrick's Socks. There are 80 socks spread out across the game's 9 normal levels and hub. These socks can be given to Patrick in exchange for golden spatulas. Each spatula costs 10 socks for a total of 8 spatulas. The final group of collectibles is shiny objects. Shiny objects can be obtained in a variety of ways. Many are scattered on the ground, they're rewarded for destroying tikis and enemies. There's even a skee ball machine that awards the player various values of shiny objects depending on which hole the player bowls into. Shiny objects are primarily given to Mr. Krabs in exchange for a spatula. The first spatula costs 3,000 shiny objects, with spatulas 2 through 6 costing 500 more than the prior spatula, and the last 2 spatulas increasing by 1,000, for a total of 39,500 shiny objects for all 8 spatulas. Besides being given to Mr. Krabs, shiny objects are also used to access additional parts of levels, such as unlocking doors, opening bridges, and lowering bungees. SpongeBob also has a progressive moveset. After defeating Robo Sandy, SpongeBob unlocks the Bubble Bowl, while he learns the Cruise Bubble after beating Robo Patrick. Each of these abilities fundamentally changes the run, with the increased movement options making virtually all spatulas faster to collect as late as possible. Crucially, the combination of both abilities allow for what's known as a Cruise Boost. By activating the Cruise Bubble and Bubble Bowl on the same frame, the bowl is cancelled by the Cruise Bubble, but its momentum is preserved. Since the momentum of the bowl is dependent on SpongeBob's movement speed on the frame he bowls, the captured speed can range from being hardly noticeable to dozens of times faster than normal movement speed. While it goes without saying that moving 10 times faster will usually save time, some spatulas need to be collected earlier as a means of unlocking these powers. As such, BFBB requires players carefully balance their routes between early and late game, positioning some spatulas early when late game time is more negligible, while placing the spatulas that benefit most from the bubble pool and cruise bubble towards the end. When the game begins, SpongeBob has access to the first section of the hub, which contains 3 spatulas, access to Jellyfish Fields, and can trade with Patrick and Mr. Krabs. Downtown and Goo Lagoon, the other 2 levels in this part of the hub, are locked behind a 5 and 10 spatula requirement respectively. The player is supposed to collect 15 spatulas to unlock the Poseidon, which contains the Robo Sandy boss fight, after which the second section of the hub is unlocked. Here, there are 2 more spatulas, as well as 3 more levels. Rock Bottom is locked behind a 25 spatula gate, while Sand Mountain requires 30 spatulas. Interestingly, the 3rd level, the Merma Layer, has no spatula requirement. The final section of the hub follows the same structure. Locked behind Industrial Park and its 40 spatula requirement, defeating Robo Patrick lets SpongeBob access 3 more spatulas and another trio of levels. While Kelp Forest necessitates 50 spatulas and the Dutchman's Graveyard needs 60, SpongeBob's Dream is always unlocked. Given how levels are progressively unlocked, some spatulas can only be done in late game. Since Kelp Forest and Graveyard both require more spatulas than Industrial Park, there's never a reason to do them prior to defeating Robo Patrick. Similarly, Rock Bottom and Sand Mountain will always be completed after Poseidon since delaying getting the Bubble Bowl isn't advantageous. Merma Layer and Dream being always accessible creates a unique routing quirk though. If the player can reach the respective sections of the hub prior to defeating the prerequisite bosses, spatulas in these levels can be completed earlier, giving runners more options to reach certain spatula thresholds, unlocking the Bubble Bowl and Cruise Bubble sooner. Combined with the 5 additional hub spatulas, sequence breaking the hub world provides access to over 20 spatulas to choose from. For much of the game's history, this sequence break has defined the rest of the run. Separating each section of the hub is a large invisible wall that extends far into the sky. These walls don't span the entire length of the world though, meaning that runners could theoretically go around them. The issue with going around is this line. Battle for Bikini Bottom deploys several methods of out-of-bounds detection, with the 2 most relevant ones being triggers and out-of-bounds sand. Activate either of these, and SpongeBob will be dragged off screen by Hans and placed back in bounds at set locations. Luckily, both of these means of detection can be avoided. By leaving a level while Hans is on screen, the game continuously considers him as being on screen. Being in this state prevents the game from calling Hans when SpongeBob walks through an out-of-bounds trigger, thus allowing the player to reach normally inaccessible places. Unfortunately, out-of-bounds sand works a little differently. When SpongeBob touches the sand, a 2-second timer begins where, if SpongeBob touches the sand after this timer expires without having gone back inbounds, Hans will be called regardless. This provides a small window where the player can walk around on the sand safely, after which the game will forcefully reset SpongeBob to his latest checkpoint. By both disabling the Hans triggers and carefully managing the sand timer, it's possible for SpongeBob to walk down this path, jump into a hole in the collision, under the invisible wall before double jumping, ledge grabbing back onto the ground and proceeding to the second section of the hub. This method is the Occam's razor of sequence breaking this part of the game, with the only tangential component being disabling Hans triggers, meaning it could be done just a few minutes into the run. The other option to sequence break is going over the walls. While the walls are quite high, they don't extend infinitely, meaning that with enough height, SpongeBob could go up, over, and reach the other side. The issue with this is that the means of gaining height, especially in early game, are limited, and many were not known until years after BFBB became a developed speed game. Even after being discovered, it took nearly a year for runners to figure out how the tech could be implemented into runs. The result of this was 2 competing routes. Due to the newness of going over the wall, the run was standardized around going out of bounds. While the difference may seem small, this routing choice had a cascading effect on nearly the entire run. Since the goal of both routes is to reach the same place, the difference is the spatulas that are used to get there. Both runs begin in SpongeBob's Pineapple, with runners collecting 50 shiny objects to open the closet and obtaining the first golden spatula. From here, SpongeBob goes into the hub and makes his way into Jellyfish Fields, disabling Hans along the way. Once in, runners jump into a normally inaccessible plunge pool where they grab a spatula before drowning. It's at this point where the routes diverge. For the out-of-bounds options, runners warp back to the hub at this point and perform the sequence break. Once on the other side, players immediately use another trick to reach the third part of the hub, collecting 2 of its 3 spatulas before returning to finish up the initial part of Jellyfish Fields. After this, it's back to Hub 3 to enter SpongeBob's Dream where 4 spatulas are collected. Back in Hub 1, the spatula in Squid's house is collected, and since runners have over 10 spatulas, they can enter Goo Lagoon. This level is completed in reverse, collecting the spatulas in Goo Caves, on top of the sandcastle, and 1 from Larry for destroying this robot. At this point, runners have 15 spatulas and can enter the Poseidon and defeat Robo Sandy. The any percent route would be revolutionized in 2020 though, when the community discovered how to go over the wall instead. After starting the game, the two routes diverged after collecting the first spatula in Jellyfish Fields. By collecting 2 more spatulas in Jellyfish Fields before returning to the hub, runners have 4 spatulas and can collect a 5th by grabbing top of SpongeBob's pineapple. It's worth noting that in the out of bounds route, downtown wasn't entered until late game. This has the obvious benefit of additional spatulas being accessible early. The first of these is Tiki's Go Boom, where SpongeBob needs to slam 4 buttons to destroy a cannon. The buttons are covered in stacks of Tikis, which need to be blown up in order to reach the buttons, providing SpongeBob with 1,000 shiny objects, or 1/3 of the value of the first spatula from Mr. Krabs. SpongeBob then makes his way to the rooftops, along the way collecting a sock and some more shiny objects. This is where the unique benefits of moving downtown to early game can be seen. In BFBB, SpongeBob has the ability to turn into a ball, but this can only be done using the SpongeBall power-up. This ability is only found in 4 levels: Dutchman's Graveyard, Rock Bottom, Downtown, and the Hub. Even the hub comes with a stipulation though. The power-up only spawns in the first section of the hub after Poseidon is defeated. This leaves Downtown as the only level where it can be accessed prior to sequence breaking. While there are several ways to reach the rooftop spatula, one of the most game-breaking tricks makes use of the Sponge Ball. When SpongeBob activates the Sponge Ball, the game stores the player's location at the time of transformation. For instance, this Thunder Tiki is perched on top of a stack of Shush Tikis. If a player approaches Shush Tikis without tiptoeing, they'll shrink away, allowing SpongeBob to jump onto the Thunder Tiki. By transforming on top of this Thunder Tiki, the game will have SpongeBob's location be stored as on the Tiki, but by rolling away from the Tiki stack, the Shush Tikis underneath it will reappear, pushing the Thunder Tiki back up. If SpongeBob then exits the Sponge Ball state, the game will account for this change in elevation in a single frame, displacing SpongeBob upwards. By jumping on this frame, SpongeBob's jump captures the vertical displacement, causing him to launch into the air and reach the rooftop spatula, before entering rooftops proper and collecting another spatula right near the beginning. This is where the true genius of the route comes into play though. SpongeBob then warps back to downtown streets and sets up the same SpongeBall displacement as he did before. The difference is, when he exits the Sponge Ball state, the runner also pauses the game and warps to the hub. By jumping on the very first frame that SpongeBob is loaded in, it's possible to store the vertical momentum through the load. This allows SpongeBob to sail over the wall and reach the second section of the hub. Critically, it also allows him to obtain the spatula on top of Shady Shoals, which is otherwise unobtainable until mid-game by humans. From here, runners are able to finish hubs 2 and 3 similar to the out of bounds route, with one key difference. Since Downtown provides so many shinies, it's possible to purchase a spatula from Mr. Krabs in early game. While this may seem insignificant, it actually is the key to one of the most game-changing strategies this route allows for. As you progress through the game, Mr. Krabs moves to your current section of the hub, meaning that he won't appear in the second or third section of the hub until after Poseidon or Industrial Park have been beaten, respectively. The exception to this is after SpongeBob destroys the robots in the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs will spawn when SpongeBob goes to hub 3. This is significant as, while the game only shows there being 8 spatulas you can buy from Mr. Krabs, there are actually 3 sets of spatulas, with each section of the hub having its own set. This weird approach to crab spatulas allows runners to do something that isn't possible with any other spatula: duplication. The way this works is runners need to start by avoiding talking to crabs in hub 1, then progress through the route until reaching hub 3. At this point, they can enter the Krusty Krab, destroy the robots, and if they have over 3,000 shiny objects, warp back to hub 3 and purchase the 3,000 shiny spatula from Mr. Krabs. After this, by going back and talking to Hub 1 Mr. Krabs, the system resets itself, allowing SpongeBob to purchase the 3,000 shiny spatula for a second time, and allowing for 9 Mr. Krabs spatulas in all. With these spatulas moved to early game, Goo Lagoon could be pushed back to mid game. This change in routing came with immediate benefits, as well as sowing the seeds for strategies yet to be implemented. The most pressing benefit of Goo Lagoon in mid game comes from collecting King of the Castle with the Bubble Bowl unlocked. This spatula is closely located to the Over the Moat spatula. Normally, Over the Moat requires paying a clam which reveals a button. When pressed, this button raises the spatula from underneath the goo. As luck would have it though, this button is active even when it's invisible. By carefully positioning SpongeBob on this awning, it's possible to ramp the bowl over the castle's walls and hit the button. From here, SpongeBob can damage boost into the spatula and drown into the goo, allowing the spatula to be moved from late game to mid game. The other key benefit of Goo Lagoon in mid game has been many years in the making. One of the oldest and most iconic tricks in BFAB is the Sponge Glide. By positioning SpongeBob near this lifeguard tower, jumping into the goo, and then slamming at the right time while being knocked back, SpongeBob's vertical momentum will be set to 0 while retaining his horizontal movement. This causes him to levitate in the direction of his damage until something interrupts his animation. While this trick is certainly flashy, it requires heading far out of the way to set up while also not being that fast. Completing Goo Lagoon with the bowl opens up some new possibilities though. Similar to how jumping on the first frame out of a SpongeBob can capture the momentum of stored displacement, bowling on the frame SpongeBob is displaced causes him to move at incredibly high speeds. By wedging SpongeBob between these two tikis and angling him correctly, it's possible to bowl off the ledge and perform a bash, clearing the goo and landing all the way on the other side of the level. Since its discovery, this trick has been seen as one of the hardest and most impressive in the game, with it teetering on the edge of viability and always threatening to make its way into the run as the game gets more optimized. Between downtown, over the moat, and a brand new crab spatula, this route had a surplus of early and mid-game spatulas, allowing for a previously overlooked routing option to be implemented. For nearly the entirety of BFBB speedrunning, Mermalayer was considered the most boring platforming level. While there were a few skips and a few tricks, nothing about the level ever felt flashy. The best example of this is the level's first room, Mermalayer Lobby. This level mostly consisted of walking in a straight line before ledge grabbing a platform that was placed slightly too low, allowing the runner to skip just a bit of the room. While each part of the level was unique in its own way, as a whole, it's seen as slow and uninteresting. By pushing Mermalayer to late game, it could be completed using the cruise boost. Not only did this significantly speed up the boring walking segments, it allowed for unique movement and better level flow. A common theme between nearly all speedruns is trying to mitigate backtracking. Having to return to a location is nearly always slower than completing it all at once. When Mermalayer was completed in mid-game, this wasn't an option due to perhaps the most notorious spatula in the game, the Rolling Ballroom, a physical embodiment of a Rube Goldberg machine dropped right in the middle of the Mermalayer. This is one of the slowest spatulas to collect casually. As luck would have it though, completing the ballroom doesn't spawn the spatula, it only raises the glass that contains it. Unfortunately, the only way runners have found to clip into the glass requires the cruise bubble and the bubble bowl, meaning that it required backtracking in late game to collect the spatula. By having the entirety of the level in late game, the route became significantly more streamlined. Now, runners can enter the ballroom, wedge SpongeBob between two tikis, and bowl on the frame of displacement. This gives SpongeBob the perfect amount of speed to reach the glass, allowing him to quickly set up a bowling clip and collect the spatula without completing the Rube Goldberg. This completely removed any need to backtrack in the level, creating a faster and more linear route. More than anything, change in speedrunning often comes down to questioning what everyone else in a community thinks is true. The longer something is standard, the fewer people question it or search for ways to improve. But even if a community is under the impression that everything is locked down, it's worth questioning if they're right. Oftentimes, routing is like a puzzle. Some tricks and skips are very straightforward. You can see from a distance how they're going to fit into place and what'll go around them. Other times, it requires trial and error, where until the last piece is placed, the picture isn't clear and there are 100 parts almost fitting together. In the case of BFBB, changing the third spatula that was collected had a ripple effect that required re-examining nearly every part of the run. If a few runners hadn't questioned what was commonly accepted to be true about the nature of the run, it's entirely possible that no one would have ever thought to reroute the game. In philosophy, there's a principle known as Occam's razor, which lays out the idea that when presented with competing explanations, the simplest one is normally correct. Rube Goldberg machines stand as a platonic antithesis to this ideal. Its beauty stems from its intricacies, and its absurdity induces fascination. An inescapable fact of life is that you'll encounter problems every single day. The vast majority of these will be solved within seconds, with hardly a fleeting thought being given to them. Others will take days or weeks of time and thought, while some may never truly be solved. Speedrunning is the culmination of countless problem solvers coming together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. It's the result of a carefully designed machine being set into motion, one where everyone knows the destination but few can guess the path taken. It requires brilliance of community, execution, and imagination working in tandem. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Also, if you could share it with a person or two, it really does make a difference. Seeing all the support this channel has received helps motivate us to keep making videos. If I missed any examples of absolutely impressive speedrunning, feel free to leave them in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.